So I was watching the Joy Reid show on Sunday, and she had an interesting little game as far as who you thought was going to be able to make it through the first four primary elections and primary caucuses, and who was going to be strong enough to make it through into Florida and California. Excuse me. And it made me think, and there are a lot of names out there, but first things first, let me give you a rundown of the primaries for 2020 so that you have an idea of how this thing is going to flow. The very first primary, as usual, is Iowa, and it's a caucus, which occurs on February the 3rd. The following week, the New Hampshire primary is February the 11th, followed by the Nevada caucuses, February 22nd, the South Carolina primary, which is February the 29th. Then you have your first Super Tuesday, which is March the 3rd, which has Alabama, California, Massachusetts, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, Vermont, and Virginia. The following week you have the Louisiana primary, which is March 7th. Then you have one of the several mini Tuesdays, March the 10th, which is Michigan, Mississippi, Missouri, and Ohio, followed up by another mini Super Tuesday, March 17th, Arizona, Florida, Illinois, and more than likely Colorado, Maine, and Minnesota, though those dates have not been locked up in stone for that particular week. The following week you have the Wisconsin primary, April the 7th, and the week after, 3 weeks after that you have another mini Tuesday, which has Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Rhode Island. May the 5th has the Indiana primary, followed up the following week by the West Virginia primary, which is the 12th of May. Then you have another small mini primary on May the 19th, which has Arkansas, Oregon, and Kentucky. On June the 2nd, you have another mini primary with Montana, New Jersey, New Mexico, and South Dakota. Puerto Rico is the following week on 5 days later on June the 7th. And then on June 16th, you have the final primary, which is Washington and the District of Columbia. As of today, the following states don't have their primary dates locked up. That would be Alaska, Georgia, Idaho, Kansas, North Dakota, Utah, Wyoming, Nebraska, Hawaii, and New York. Now, those are the dates for the primaries. Now, let's discuss the potential people who are going to have an opportunity to win at least some of those primaries and I guess be talked about in a serious vein regarding a run for the presidency. First things first, let's get rid of a lot of the names that you're hearing out there, which would be Michael Abinetti. He's not going to run. You have Delaney out of Maryland. He ran before and did like piss poor. You have Deval Patrick out of Massachusetts. I don't think that he's going to run. Terry McAuliffe may take a look, but as far as really getting in there solid, I don't think so. You got Kristen Gillibrand, who is actively considering it, but based on all the crap that she has put the party through, i.e. her attack on Al Franken, the donors basically really don't want to have a lot to do with her. Then you have Joe Kennedy out of Massachusetts. He's part of the Kennedy clan. You have Matt Bullock out of Montana that nobody's heard of. Andrew Cuomo, who always flirts with it, but never really jumps in there. You got de Blasio, the mayor of New York, and I don't think he's going to go. Michael Bloomberg is an interesting idea. He may run. He may run. Then you have Gil Garcetti out of California. I'm thinking he's going to take a look, but I'm not really sure about him. Then you have Hickenlooper out of Colorado, and they're always throwing his name in there. He may get in initially, but I don't think he's going to have staying power. Eric Holden, he has been mentioned several times as far as running, but no, I'm not feeling him. Then you got Inslee out of Washington and Merkel out of Washington. I don't think either one of those guys are going to run. You got Chris Murphy out of Connecticut. He's a fresh name and he could run. Then you got O'Malley out of Maryland. He's run before and really doesn't do anything. And then you got Tim Ryan out of Ohio, and he couldn't even beat Nancy Pelosi out for the minority leader in the House of Representatives. So I don't think he's viable. And then you have another guy, Tim Steyer. Now he may decide to run if there's not a candidate out there that meets his specifications. Now let's talk about the people. Oh, I'm sorry, I left off two, and I'll talk about them a little bit more in depth. That's Andrew Gillum and Stacey Abrams. My opinion, Stacey Abrams really is more fit to head the DNC because she is really an activist. And as far as getting voter laws overturned and getting the ground game going, I think she's a perfect choice. Now, Andrew Gillum, he's a hot name right now, but I think he would be better served to run against Marco Rubio in Florida, and I think he would have a pretty strong shot. So now let's get down to brass tacks. You have several people here that more than likely are going to really stick their feet in the fire. Starting with Beto O'Rourke, and you got Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, Sherrod Brown out of Ohio, Cory Booker out of Jersey, Amy Klobuchar out of Minnesota, Elizabeth Warren out of Massachusetts, and Bernie Sanders, obviously, out of Vermont. Now, out of all of that group, I think that the nominee is going to be one of the following, and in my opinion, there are several combinations that I think would work well. I say that because, one, you're going to have a combination of youth, because that's what the country's clamoring for, but you're also going to need experience, i.e. Barack Obama and Joe Biden. Now, I'm scratching Joe Biden out of there because he should have ran in 2016. He, I believe, missed his shot, and I'm going to say the same thing about Bernie Sanders. So I'm crossing those two guys pretty much off my list as far as running for president. I'm down to Kamala Harris. She's probably the front runner at this point, followed by Beto O'Rourke, Amy Klobuchar, and Elizabeth Warren. And I'm kind of sour on Warren because I think she should have run against Clinton as well. But I think that a ticket with Beto O'Rourke and Elizabeth Warren would be a pretty strong ticket. Now, a lot of people are talking about Beto O'Rourke and Kamala Harris being running on the same ticket. I'm not buying that. I think only because neither one of them has like super experience. Kamala Harris, even though she's a super strong prosecutor, this basically is her first term in the Senate. And Beto O'Rourke, basically his highest office has been the House of Representatives. I like Beto O'Rourke with Amy Klobuchar as his vice presidential candidate. Now, if Kamala Harris gets in there, I like her with Sherrod Brown. Then everybody else, talking about Cory Booker, Elizabeth Warren, basically running together, you got a possibility there. But my top choices would be, again, Kamala Harris running with Sherrod Brown, and Beto O'Rourke running with Amy Klobuchar. I think there's enough balance there, particularly given the fact that O'Rourke basically ran real well in Texas, and I think that nationally, his ability to raise money, and not from big money PACs, but nationally, i.e. Bernie Sanders, is a strong qualification for him to run. Kamala Harris is going to be able to raise a lot of money because she is locked in with big money PACs. Sherrod Brown, not so much. Cory Booker, somewhat. Amy Klobuchar, again, not so much. And the same thing with Elizabeth Warren. So, folks, that's my thinking as far as what's going to go down in 2020. But, you know, as the events unfold, you know, we'll see. Basically, I think O'Rourke is going to probably more than likely be fairly strong in the Iowa caucuses, but Harris could be strong as well there. The New Hampshire primary, I think O'Rourke is better suited to deal with that than Harris. Then you got Nevada, again a caucus, and it just depends on the ground game. And then again you have a primary in South Carolina, which more than likely is going to probably favor Kamala Harris. But all of the other names that I mentioned, they should be able to do fairly well. Now, when you jump into California and Florida, that's going to favor anybody and everybody that can raise big bucks, and I mean a lot of them. So depending on what goes down on those first four, that following Super Tuesday is going to separate the men from the boys, because on March the 3rd, you have California and Texas, two giant states with a lot of votes to be had. Massachusetts is in there as well as Virginia. So once Super Tuesday clears, then depending on what happens with the debates, and the debates will probably be scheduled after Super Tuesday, that's really going to tell us a lot as to who's going to be the number one candidate coming out of the Democratic convention.